Today, we delve into cases with startling twists that could easily be mistaken for Hollywood scripts, yet all are grounded in startling reality. Our opening story is both shocking and complex, overflowing with unexpected turns. This isn't a straightforward tale of murder, it's a series of intertwined tragedies that defy belief. Sharon Marshall seemed destined for greatness as a teenager. She was a standout student and a lieutenant colonel in the ROTC at Forest Park High School in Georgia. Smart, compassionate, and driven, she earned a full scholarship to the Georgia Institute of Technology, where she planned to study aerospace engineering and dreamt of a career at NASA. But after graduating in 1986, Sharon's path took a sudden detour. She was pregnant and had kept it a secret, even from the baby's father. She managed to hide her pregnancy and eventually gave the baby boy up for adoption to a wealthy couple in Texas. The ordeal disrupted her life plans significantly, and at one point she even tried to run away with her boyfriend, although unsuccessfully. Instead of college, Sharon moved to Tampa, Florida, seeking a fresh start with a man named Franklin Delano Floyd. Though she began a new relationship with another man, she soon found herself pregnant again. Like before, she didn't reveal her pregnancy to the father. This time, however, she decided to keep the baby and raise him with Frank. In 1988, she gave birth to a son, Michael Gregory Marshall. Sharon and Frank's relationship was complex and unclear. Whether it was romantic or not remained a mystery, but they lived together and both cared for Michael. Frank worked as a painter, but chronic back problems often kept him from working regularly. As a result, Sharon took up exotic dancing to support their family, supplemented by welfare checks to make ends meet. Sharon was well liked by her coworkers for her kindness and friendliness, and she had formed a close bond with Cheryl Comesso, an 18-year-old she worked with. Despite their friendship, Cheryl often clashed with Sharon's companion, Frank, and rumors circulated about a past fling between Cheryl and Frank. During a boating trip in 1989, tensions escalated when Cheryl and Frank had a heated argument. Afterward, Cheryl reported Sharon to social services for underreporting her income as an exotic dancer, which led to Sharon losing her welfare benefits. Furious over Cheryl's actions, Frank confronted her outside their workplace. Witnesses saw him strike Cheryl in the face during the argument. Soon after, Cheryl planned to visit a friend but never confirmed her arrival. Her father became worried and reported her missing when she didn't call him. Cheryl's car was later found abandoned at an airport, sparking a search. Frank and Sharon became prime suspects in Cheryl's mysterious disappearance, but no proof linked them to the case. The couple hastily moved away and started using aliases, which only fueled suspicions. In 1989, Frank and Sharon married, claiming it was so that Sharon's son, Michael, could have Frank's last name. Despite the new start, Frank's aggressive behavior continued to isolate them, especially from Sharon's friends. He once threatened another dancer who advised Sharon to leave him, ominously stating that he would kill Sharon if she ever tried to leave. Unbeknownst to Frank, Sharon was already planning an escape with a man she had met at the club, fearing what Frank might do to her or Michael if she left him abruptly. Before Sharon could leave Frank, tragedy struck. She was found unconscious beside a highway, seemingly struck in a hit-and-run accident. Frank told the police he was asleep when it happened. Despite being rushed to the hospital, Sharon never woke up. Her friends from the club visited regularly, saying she seemed to be improving, but abruptly, Frank banned them from her room. Mysteriously, Sharon passed away just 5 days after the accident, her recovery cut short under suspicious circumstances. The doctor, noticing older bruises on Sharon's body, ruled her death a homicide, suspecting her fatal head injury wasn't caused by a car. Although there was no direct evidence linking Frank to an attack on Sharon or to any foul play in the hospital, suspicion around him grew, especially after it emerged that Sharon's coworkers had to pay for her headstone, not Frank. Frank then attempted to claim a $80,000 life insurance policy he had taken out on Sharon just months before her death. His attempt faltered initially as he used various aliases, and the social security numbers he provided did not match his identities. Eventually, he submitted his claim under his real name, Frank Delano Floyd. This act began to unravel Frank's web of lies, exposing his dark past. Decades earlier, at 19, Frank was convicted for the abduction and assault of a 4-year-old girl, sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. He escaped from a mental hospital by stealing a car and within a day robbed a bank, leading to his recapture. Released in 1972, Frank immediately attempted another abduction, this time at a gas station. He was arrested, but after posting bail, he fled, skipping his court date. A federal warrant was swiftly issued for Frank's arrest when he disappeared, resorting to multiple aliases while evading law enforcement. This cat-and-mouse game continued until he was compelled to provide his actual full name to a life insurance company, trying to cash in on Sharon's policy. His attempt to escape justice was short-lived. Authorities captured him in Georgia, where he was sent back to prison to serve the remainder of his sentence. For Sharon's friends, his arrest brought a semblance of justice for her tragic death. During his escapades, Frank had left Michael in the care of social services, from where the boy was placed into foster care with a nurturing family. However, Michael exhibited unusual behavior, being nonverbal and using only screams and moans as a form of communication. Despite claiming paternity, Frank's relationship with the child was strained. During prison visits, Michael showed reluctance, prompting a DNA test. The results confirmed that Michael was not Frank's biological son, leading to the cessation of the visits. The drama, however, was far from over. Upon his release in September 1994, after serving 4 years, Frank's obsession with Michael continued. He began to stalk Michael and his foster family in Oklahoma, despite knowing he had no chance of regaining custody. His desperation culminated on September 12, 1994, when Frank appeared at Michael's school, demanding to see the principal, James Davis. Denied the ability to take Michael, Frank resorted to violence, brandishing a gun. Frank coerced the principal, under threat of violence, to drive them to a remote location. There, he tied Davis to a tree, leaving him unharmed, stole his truck, and abducted Michael. The school soon realized the gravity of the situation, sparking a desperate search. It took 2 months before Frank was apprehended in Louisville, Kentucky. However, Michael was nowhere to be found. Despite extensive efforts to locate him, Frank provided no information, coldly telling the authorities, "It's none of your business where he is, nor do I care how much any of you in Oklahoma miss him or love him." The case of Michael remains a haunting and unresolved mystery to this day. During Frank's 1995 trial for kidnapping Michael, a shocking twist emerged. That same year, skeletal remains shrouded in vines were discovered in Pinellas County, Florida. Although initially unidentified, it was determined that the victim had been brutally beaten and suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Coincidentally, a mechanic in Kansas stumbled upon a disturbing find while cleaning out a truck he had bought at auction: an envelope containing 97 photographs of a beaten and bound woman. This truck had previously been in Frank Floyd's possession after he stole it in 1994. Upon closer examination, injuries depicted in the photographs matched those on the skeletal remains, identifying the victim as Cheryl Comesso. Frank was already facing a lengthy prison sentence for kidnapping Michael, who remained missing. He was then tried and convicted for Cheryl's murder, resulting in a death sentence. However, the photos found in the truck led to an even more horrifying revelation. They included images of Frank assaulting a young girl, separate from the ones of Cheryl, indicating a pattern of long-standing abuse. The investigation into these older images eventually led to a major breakthrough in 2014 when the true identity of Sharon was finally uncovered. To understand the full scope of Sharon's story, we need to revisit the mid-1970s. After a stint in prison and while on the run for attempted abduction, Frank had married Sandy Chipman under the alias Brandon Williams. Sandy, unaware of his real identity, had a troubled past herself. They married at a truck stop, far from an ideal start. Sandy, who had 4 children at the time, was forced to leave them in Frank's care when she served a 30-day jail sentence for passing bad checks. Upon her release, she returned to an empty home. Frank had disappeared, taking her children with him. This grim pattern of Frank's behavior painted a clear picture of a man whose criminal activities were deeply entrenched and devastatingly impactful on the lives of those around him. It took Sandy Chipman years to piece together the whereabouts of her children after her brief incarceration. Eventually, she located two of her daughters, Allison and Amy, under the care of social services. However, her oldest daughter, Suzanne, and her son, Philip, remained missing for a prolonged period. Philip later resurfaced as an adult and confirmed his relationship with Sandy through a DNA test, revealing that Frank had put him up for adoption. The mystery of Suzanne's whereabouts took an even more disturbing turn. Suzanne was actually Sharon Marshall. Sharon Marshall, born Suzanne Marie Savarkis, was one of Sandy Chipman's children whom Frank had abducted. After taking Sandy's children, Frank had split them up, sending them to different social services, but he chose to raise Suzanne himself. As they moved across states, Frank concocted various tales about Suzanne's origins, typically claiming to have rescued her after she was abandoned by her biological parents. He gave her the alias Tanya Hughes, but by high school, she was known as Sharon Marshall. The horrifying reality was that Sharon had been kidnapped by her own stepfather, Frank, who raised her, assaulted her, married her as an adult, possibly contributed to her death, and later abducted her child, Michael. In 2014, another grim revelation came to light. Frank confessed to having murdered Michael. He claimed to have shot him while they were on the run, hiding his body along Interstate 35. Despite extensive searches, Michael's body was never found, and it was suspected that wild hogs in the area might have scavenged it. Although Frank was never convicted of Sharon's murder, many believe he was responsible. To this day, Frank refuses to discuss Sharon's death and remains on death row for the murder of Cheryl Comesso, awaiting execution. This twisted saga involving lies, abduction, and murder remains a chilling testament to the cruel capabilities of Frank Floyd and the tragic fate that befell Sharon and her family. Our next case unfolds with the chilling story of the Villemont family from L'Épingle-sur-Vologne, a small town in eastern France. Jean-Marie Villemont, a factory foreman, and his wife Christine were living a content life with their young son Gregory, born on August 24, 1980. Their happiness seemed complete in their new home, celebrating the arrival of their son. However, a dark shadow soon loomed over their idyllic life. Beginning shortly after Gregory's birth, the Villemont family started receiving anonymous, threatening letters and phone calls. The sender vowed revenge against Jean-Marie, but never clarified the reason. These menacing communications continued for over 4 years, increasingly involving threats against Jean-Marie's parents as well. Then, on a seemingly ordinary day, October 16, 1984, the family's world was shattered. 4-year-old Gregory was playing in the garden and suddenly vanished. Christine, realizing her son was missing, alerted the police and frantically searched the nearby village. Despite their efforts, there was no sign of Gregory. Amidst the desperate search, an anonymous call claimed responsibility for kidnapping, strangling, and disposing of Gregory in the River Vologne, proclaiming it as revenge. The following day, as the Villemont grappled with this horrific claim, Jean-Marie discovered a letter in their mailbox, chilling in its message. "I hope you die of grief, boss. Your money won't bring back your son. Here's my revenge, you." Tragically, Gregory's body was found later that day near the Vologne River, just 7 kilometers from their home. His hands and feet were bound, and his face obscured by his wool hat, a grim testament to the cruel act he suffered. The murder, which shocked and gripped France, became infamously known as L'Affaire de Gregory. The media dubbed the anonymous tormentor Le Corbeau, the Crow, referencing a famous French film with a similar storyline of anonymous threats. The investigation intensified in 1985 when Bernard Laroche, Jean-Marie's cousin, was arrested. His apprehension was based on a coerced statement from his 15-year-old sister-in-law, who later recanted her testimony. Laroche denied any involvement, maintaining his innocence until he was ultimately released. The case took an even darker turn when, after Laroche's release, Jean-Marie publicly vowed in front of reporters that he would kill Laroche, convinced of his guilt in his son's murder. This declaration added a complex layer of family betrayal and unresolved grief to an already heart-wrenching case. The case of Gregory Vilma took another shocking turn on March 25, 1985, when handwriting experts suggested that the threatening letters might have been penned by Gregory's mother, Christine. However, just days later, unconvinced of his wife's guilt and determined to seek vengeance, Jean-Marie Villemont confronted his cousin, Bernard Laroche, at his workplace and fatally shot him. Jean-Marie was subsequently convicted of murder and sentenced to 5 years in prison. In a parallel twist, Christine was charged with the murder of their son in July 1985, during which she was pregnant with twins. Protesting her innocence, Christine went on a hunger strike for 11 days, ultimately leading to her release on appeal due to insufficient evidence and lack of motive. Tragically, as she was freed, she collapsed and reportedly lost one of her twins. It wasn't until 1993 that Christine was formally cleared of all charges. Jean-Marie, meanwhile, was released from prison in 1987 after serving just 2.5 years. Despite these developments, the Villemont family remained in the dark about who really killed Gregory. Over the years, the case continued to captivate and haunt France, leading to repeated reopenings and re-examinations involving advanced forensic tests on the letters, the rope used to bind Gregory, and his clothing. Yet, all efforts proved inconclusive. In 2017, the investigation was reopened with new evidence, leading to the arrests of Gregory's great-aunt and great-uncle, among other family members. While the aunt was released, the great-aunt and great-uncle refused to cooperate with the police. No convictions followed. The enduring pressure and scrutiny took a toll on Jean-Michel Lambert, the magistrate overseeing the initial investigation, who tragically ended his life in 2017, 33 years after Gregory's murder. The motive behind Gregory's murder remains a topic of speculation, with theories ranging from family jealousy to conflicts stemming from Jean-Marie's workplace. Despite numerous family members coming under suspicion, no conclusive evidence has been found to pinpoint the killer. As of December 2020, the case was once again reopened, with police utilizing a new technology called stylometrics. This technique analyzes the style, syntax, and punctuation of the threatening letters in hopes of identifying the perpetrator. A new suspect has been identified, although not yet publicly named, sparking hopes that the mystery of Gregory Villemont's murder might finally be resolved. Nicholas Barclay's case is far from your typical missing person story. It carries a twist that borders on the unbelievable. Born on December 31, 1980, Nicholas was the youngest child in his family, raised in San Antonio, Texas. Despite a seemingly normal childhood, he developed a troublesome reputation as a preteen. Known for his confrontations with his mother, absenteeism from school, threats towards teachers, petty theft, and even a break-in at a convenience store, Nicholas quickly accumulated a juvenile record. By the age of 13, he had 3 tattoos, crudely inked by friends with an unsterilized needle. Diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, Nicholas's behavior led his exhausted mother to ask her older son Jason to help manage the household. On June 13, 1994, a pivotal day unfolded when Nicholas called home after playing basketball, seeking a ride. Jason, who answered the call, decided not to disturb their mother, who was resting after a late work shift, advising Nicholas to walk home instead. Tragically, Nicholas never made it back. Given Nicholas's history and the looming court hearing scheduled the next day to determine his potential placement in a rehabilitation center, many initially suspected he had simply run away. However, as days turned into weeks with no sign of him, concerns deepened. Nicholas's mother implored for a serious investigation, but it wasn't until months later that a puzzling development occurred. Jason contacted the police, claiming he heard Nicholas attempting to break into their garage. The arriving officers found no signs of forced entry or any trace of Nicholas, casting doubts on Jason's credibility and leaving everyone baffled as to why he would fabricate such a claim. This mysterious disappearance continued to perplex investigators and family alike, with each passing day adding layers of complexity to a case already shrouded in ambiguity and speculation. The Barclay family, grappling with the unresolved disappearance of Nicholas, was thrust back into a whirlpool of emotion when, in 1997, 3 years after he vanished, they received the astonishing news that Nicholas had been found alive in Linares, Spain. According to the authorities, Nicholas had been abducted and ensnared by a child trafficking ring that forcibly moved him across continents. After enduring years of captivity, Nicholas reportedly escaped his captors. The police relayed to the Barclays that during his ordeal, Nicholas had been compelled to speak only French, and he had suffered injuries. Filled with a mix of hope and trepidation, Nicholas's older sister, Carrie, flew to Spain to identify and bring her brother home. However, the reunion was fraught with unease. Nicholas, donning a baseball cap and sunglasses, initially seemed fearful and hesitant, particularly worried that Carrie might not recognize him, which could lead to him being stranded in Spain. Despite these challenges, Carrie felt a surge of recognition and claimed she knew he was her brother. As they spent time together, Nicholas, who professed to have scant memories of his life before the abduction due to trauma-induced memory blockages, slowly began to respond to family photographs. His tentative inquiries about their grandfather hinted at flickers of recollection. Before leaving Spain, Nicholas was subjected to a crucial test by the police. He was shown family photos that Carrie hadn't previously reviewed with him. Nicholas made only a minor error in identifying his relatives, which was deemed sufficient for him to be allowed to return to Texas. The family's reunion was joyous, yet shadowed by perplexing discrepancies. Notably, Nicholas had left Texas as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, but the young man who returned bore dark hair and brown eyes. Nicholas provided a bizarre explanation for this dramatic transformation, claiming that his abductors had conducted experiments to alter his physical appearance to conceal his identity and thwart any attempts at recognition. This strange twist added layers of mystery and skepticism to an already incredible saga, leaving the family and the community to wrestle with more questions than answers about what truly happened to Nicholas during those lost years. The return of Nicholas was enveloped in a cocoon of joy and relief for the Barclay family, which perhaps clouded their judgment when faced with glaring inconsistencies raised by authorities. His heavy French accent was rationalized by his harrowing tale of being forced to speak only French during his captivity. Eager to put the ordeal behind them, the Barclays urged investigators to close the case. The story, laden with dramatic twists, caught the attention of a film crew who wanted to document Nicholas's reintegration into his family. It was during this filming that the fabric of the tale began to unravel. A local private detective, working alongside the crew, grew suspicious of this French-speaking, dark-haired individual claiming to be Nicholas. The detective initiated his own investigation, which included comparing photos of Nicholas's ears from before his disappearance to those of the person claiming to be him. The ears did not match, a critical clue, as ears do not change shape with age. With these findings, the detective approached the authorities, and by February 1998, the FBI was involved. A court order allowed them to take fingerprints and DNA samples from the individual posing as Nicholas. The results were astonishing. The man living with the Barclays was not Nicholas, but a 23-year-old Frenchman named Frédéric Pierre Bourdin, known in the criminal world as the Chameleon, for his history of assuming over 500 false identities. Despite the irrefutable evidence and Frédéric's own courtroom admission of his identity fraud, the Barclays struggled to accept the truth. Frédéric was subsequently sentenced to 6 years in prison for passport fraud and perjury. This revelation left the Barclays and the community with haunting questions. What happened to the real Nicholas? How could the family have been so thoroughly deceived? And what were Frédéric's motives for undertaking such an elaborate ruse? The case not only exposed the lengths to which Frédéric went to assume another's life, but also raised unsettling concerns about the Barclays' willingness to accept him as Nicholas without scrutinizing the discrepancies. The story of Nicholas Barclay and Frédéric Bourdin remains a stark reminder of the complexities and vulnerabilities inherent in missing persons cases. Frédéric Bourdin's own reflections on the situation added yet another layer of complexity and suspicion to the already baffling case. He expressed astonishment at how readily the Barkley family accepted him as Nicholas, suggesting that it was almost too easy, which cast further doubt on the family's actions. Frederick even posited that the Barkleys might have been aware that he was not their son and had chosen to play along with his deception for reasons unknown to him. According to Frederick, during their initial meeting, Carey provided him with detailed information about the family, effectively coaching him to pass the police verification tests required for his return to the U.S. Interestingly, Frederick claimed that Jason, Nicholas's brother, never believed or participated in the pretense. Jason's reaction to meeting Frederick was simply to wish him good luck, implying a skepticism that he never openly disputed. The mysterious phone call made by Jason 3 months after Nicholas's disappearance, where he claimed to hear Nicholas trying to break into their garage, drew new scrutiny under these revelations. Such calls, as noted by the police, are sometimes made by perpetrators attempting to mislead investigations and suggest that a missing person is still alive. The private investigator and Frederick speculated that the family's eager acceptance of him as Nicholas might have been an attempt to cover up foul play within the family, possibly even murder. Before any further investigation could explore Jason's involvement or knowledge, he died from a drug overdose, complicating the case even further. With his death, a potential source of answers about Nicholas's fate was lost. The case eventually went cold, leaving many questions unanswered. Frederick Bourdin completed his prison sentence and resumed his activities of identity theft across Europe. The true fate of Nicholas Barkley remains a mystery, one that has captured the public's imagination and inspired the gripping Netflix documentary, The Imposter. The story continues to intrigue and horrify those who delve into the dark intersections of family secrets, identity deception, and unresolved crime.